What's up, fellow fitness fanatics? It's Dr. Jordan Taylor, undergraduate exercise science program director and associate teaching professor at the University of Kansas. I'm excited about today's episode because I'm going to present to you some of my top tips for getting healthy and fit. So tip number one, it's important to realize that getting in shape is a marathon, not a sprint. All right. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically you're creating a lifestyle change. So if you're trying to get healthier, you're trying to get fit, it's going to take some time. Just like running a marathon, that's 26.2 miles to be exact. That takes time. Getting healthier, getting more fit takes time as well. Okay, so you're going to create a whole new lifestyle. This is all about lifestyle changes. For example, it's important to take baby steps, make small changes each week, maybe small changes each day to for example, your diet. So one small change you could do is, for example, at night, instead of snacking on your normal maybe potato chips, your ice cream, replace that with a healthier snack. Say yogurt, some Greek yogurt, some blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, and a little bit of granola, right? So that's just one small change you can make in a day, and these small changes add up over time, right? Another thing you could do as far as increasing your activity levels would be set an alarm. Like if you have a desk job, an office job, set an alarm every hour. When that alarm goes off, you get up from your chair, get away from your desk, and you go on a short walk for 5 minutes. Get that blood circulating, get some of that blood back up to your brain, come back to your desk, sit down. You'll be more focused. You'll be more efficient at completing your work. So again, just a little change like that, it's also going to help you expend some more calories, get some more movement, some more activity in your day. Just as simple as setting an alarm to remind you to get up from your desk every hour. And I can admit, me personally, being a professor, I'm at my desk a lot if I'm not teaching in class or maybe at meetings. So I'm sitting a lot. That's something I need to do. And I keep telling myself I need to start doing that. Just get up, go for a walk every hour, okay? Little changes. So another thing is it's important to have patience, and more patience, right? So changes to your body once you get started with this new, fitness lifestyle, it's going to take time to see changes to your body, all right? So you can observe significant changes in body fat percentage, a lowering of your body fat percentage, and gains in muscle mass if you're doing a resistance training program within 6 months of consistent training and healthy eating, right? Pretty significant changes. And if you stay consistent, this new health fitness routine, healthy eating, consistent exercise, you may look like a whole new person after a year of being consistent. All right, so moving on to tip number 2. It is important to set goals. And of course, this goes for really anything in life. But figure out what your goals are. So when I was a personal trainer and strength coach, when I would sit down and do my initial client consultation, health fitness assessment, before we did any of that, exercise testing, and before I built their program, obviously the first thing I would ask is, well, what are your goals? So, pretty common, it's, I want to lose body fat, right? Or I want to increase muscle mass or strength. And then there's other goals like improve cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory endurance. Some people may want to improve their mobility. Some may want all of that, right? Which is good. So set your goals, and then it's important to write down your goals and be specific, right? So it could be, for example, one goal could be decrease your body fat percentage. So maybe you want to get your body fat down from, you may be obese, like 35%, it's very high body fat percentage, down to an attainable realistic body fat percentage that's healthy of, say, 15 to 18%. Okay, so that's a good goal. Write that down. It can be attained. It's realistic. Get your body fat from 35% down to 15 to 18, and you're going to be healthier, less at risk of, you know, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, just diseases associated with, you know, that higher body fat percentage. Maybe it's, again, like I mentioned earlier, improve your cardiovascular fitness level, okay? And maybe you're wanting to improve that because eventually you want to run a 5K. So a 5K race is exactly 3.1 miles. So before you can actually start training for this 5K, let's say you're sedentary, you've obviously got to increase your cardiovascular fitness level, right? And so, again, maybe you just start off by, maybe you haven't even done any walking in months, like, you know, as part of a fitness plan. So maybe you get to a point where you can walk 3 or 4 miles, then you can walk several miles uphill, then you can run several miles, then you start focusing on different types of cardiovascular training, like pace tempo training, you know, high intensity interval training to prepare you for running that 5K. Okay. So again, the last thing that I'd want to mention with goals is make sure when you set them that they're realistic, they're also measurable, and they're attainable. Okay. So number 3, it's important to track your progress. All right. So once you get started on this new health, fitness lifestyle, I know one thing that I used to do with clients when I was a trainer was before they even started on their exercise program, like on day 1 when they met with me, we would take, you know, before pictures of their body so that they could see as the months progressed how their physique was progressing. If they were losing body fat, you know, gaining muscle mass, they could look back and see where they had come from. And so that obviously helps to provide some motivation as you see visible improvements taking place over time. Also keep a log of your workouts. So, you know, there's apps for this. You know, maybe you're old school and you write it down. You know, you take a little journal to the gym and you write down your reps, your sets, the load you're lifting. If you're doing cardio, you know, the duration, maybe the percentage of your max heart rate or your heart rate reserve that you're exercising at, you know, so you're keeping track of the intensity that you're training at. So again, log all that stuff, right? And you should be seeing improvements in the numbers over time. And if you're not, or maybe you're regressing or feeling like you're overtrained, well, then there needs to be some tweaks made with your program, okay? So again, just logging those workouts. Number 1, day 1, you know, you're going to see where you're at. You're going to have a baseline, and you can see with consistent training how your strength, your endurance, all of those different kind of fitness parameters improve. Okay. Another thing I would recommend is to get your body composition measured and have fitness assessments conducted every 3 months. So these can be done by, you know, if you get a personal trainer at your local gym, a certified strength and conditioning specialist, or an exercise physiologist, say in an exercise physiology lab, like we have here at KU, at the university. So again, it's just helping you keep track of changes over time. So number 4, ask yourself, do you want to exercise or train alone? All right. So, I mean, me personally, I've trained with partners before. You know, at the gym, I've trained by myself. Obviously, when I was an athlete, you know, there was groups of us, you know, football players training together. Personally, I like working out alone. I think if you're pretty intrinsically motivated, I don't necessarily like having to, for instance, worry about meeting my partner at the gym at a specific time. I like to kind of, be flexible with my schedule and just kind of fit it in during the day whenever I feel like it or whenever I have time. And I'm motivated enough I can just, get there on my own. Okay. And some people struggle with motivation. So initially, when you start living this new lifestyle, you may want to have a workout partner, right? Because that's going to help keep you accountable, right? If you know you've got to meet your partner at the gym, you've decided that, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to meet at 6:00 p.m. after work. That can kind of help get you there, right? Because they're going to be there. So you're like, well, I better show up, okay? Plus, it may just be more fun if you're very social, and you've got a partner that's motivated too. It can be a lot of fun to have somebody to train with, which obviously that's going to help motivate you to keep returning and returning over and over again and becoming consistent. Consistency is going to be the main driver of change to your body, right? Your muscular system, your cardiovascular system, losing body fat, things like that. So if they can help you stay consistent, that's great. Also, you may enjoy even larger groups. So not just training with a partner, maybe you want to get into some group exercise classes. So things like a spin class if you enjoy cycling, Zumba classes. There's a lot of different group boot camp style classes that you can get into. So again, and plus you make a lot of friends. A lot of my friends, long-term friends, if they weren't friends that I grew up with and I still maintain contact with, I've made a ton of friends from the gym. So, and I'd say the gym community overall, most people are pretty friendly and open. So you can meet a lot of people, make a lot of friends, and it's just a great way to kind of, enhance your social life in a healthy way. Number 5, find types of physical activity and exercise you enjoy. Okay. And really, I can separate these I kind of separate physical activity and exercise, separate them out. So with physical activity, again, just maybe things like walking your dog, getting up, getting away from your desk, just becoming more active throughout the day. Whereas exercise, I think more about that as a targeted program that's trying to improve the different fitness variables or improve, cardiovascular fitness, improve muscle strength and endurance, improve muscle mass, decrease body fat, improve flexibility and mobility, right? So you create a training program to improve 1, 2, or maybe all of those variables, and that training program should be progressive. It should progressively overload your body over time to create adaptations in those different fitness domains, all right? So with, both of these categories, what are some things you can do? Find things that you enjoy doing. Well, maybe you're into sports, right? So maybe you join a rec league basketball team, okay? Flag football league. Pickleball has become very popular, right? So it's kind of like tennis and ping pong combined. The rules are a little different. I think if I remember correctly, the ball can bounce twice before you hit it over the net. Again, I know a lot of older adults really enjoy pickleball. There's softball teams you could get on, tennis, maybe it's beach volleyball. That's one thing I actually enjoy. Then there's many other options too. So for instance, you've got group exercise classes that I've mentioned previously, like spin class. Ask yourself, do you enjoy exercising outdoors more than indoors? For instance, I hate running on a treadmill. I'm more prone to do cardiovascular exercise in the summer because I enjoy running outside, but I hate being stuck inside on a treadmill. Now, some people don't mind it. They may prefer to run inside on a treadmill and not be out and about running all over town when people are driving by honking at you or whatever. So again, maybe just the environment, right, can play a role, and you may be more likely to adhere to your routine indoors versus outdoors. What about water versus land-based exercise? So, for instance, when I had extremely overweight or obese clients, I had a client when I was a trainer that weighed over 400 pounds, right? And it was very painful for him to even walk into the gym, okay? So initially, day one that I started working with him, we were in the pool, right? Because if you're in the pool, you're more buoyant. Those weight-bearing joints like your hips and knees are going to be unloaded and not having to bear all that weight. He had osteoarthritis. He had a lot of health issues. So we would work 3 times a week for 30 minutes in the pool. And I'd work him in the pool, but changes to his diet, baby steps with improving his fitness, we got his weight down. And we got it down to about 380 over the course of, I think it was about nine months. And he was feeling a lot better, a lot less joint pain, more energy, just feeling better overall. So his blood glucose, some things started improving with his blood work as well. So again, or maybe you just enjoy being in the water, right? You enjoy swimming, right? So we all have our preferences. I'm not much of a swimmer myself. I'm more of a sinker. So I prefer land-based exercise. But again, find something you enjoy, and that's going to help you adhere to and stick with your new lifestyle, okay? Other examples, of course, calisthenics, free weight training. That's something I love. Always loved weight training. Circuit training. So maybe you only have 30 minutes to exercise 3 times a week. Go to the gym, do a circuit training routine. Knock that workout out over your lunch hour, okay? Cycling, walking, jogging. Maybe you enjoy doing sprints. There's just so many options. Plyometrics if you're an athlete, and agility drills. Also balance training. That's an important and often overlooked thing, especially like if you're an older adult, is to incorporate some balance training, right? And it's going to help with fall prevention. Okay, so a lot of different options. Find things you enjoy doing. And if you don't quite understand how to do a certain type of exercise, again, find a knowledgeable professional, a trainer, a certified strength and conditioning specialist that can help guide you. Okay, number 6. Create an exercise program that you can consistently perform. All right, and with this exercise program, there's a couple things you want to remember here, and that is Fit VP. So F stands for frequency. I stands for intensity. T, time. Type for the other T, type of exercise. V is volume. And P is, make my G there, progression. All right. So you remember Fit VP when you design your exercise program. So frequency of exercise, how often are you going to train? Now this could be limited by maybe your work schedule. We all have work-life balance. Maybe you have kids. Your time is limited. So that's one of the first things. In fact, I was at the gym the other night and had somebody come up to me and ask it about, wanting to get stronger. And I was like, well, how many days a week do you have available? And they told me 3. All right. That's a lot of times where I start is like, okay, let's just see what time you have. Okay. And what you can dedicate. Some people may have more time. Some people have less. So frequency. Now there are some guidelines that I'm going to cover here. American College of Sports Medicine guidelines for, the frequency, the time you should spend doing, for instance, say cardiovascular exercise. So there are some guidelines for that you should try to follow to improve your fitness level in the different areas, the different categories of fitness. So we'll discuss those. But again, frequency, how many times per week are you going to exercise or train? And then intensity. So this again is just, it depends on the type of exercise. If we're talking cardiorespiratory, cardiovascular exercise, intensity is going to be a percentage of your maximum heart rate or a percent of your heart rate reserve. So higher heart rates that you're training at, that's more intense exercise, right? If you're training at a lower heart rate, that's less intense exercise, okay? Intensity with, for instance, resistance training is going to be the load that you're lifting. So if you're lifting a heavier load, that's higher intensity resistance training. If you're lifting a lighter load for a lot of reps, that's lower intensity resistance training. And then time, what's the total time of each session that you're training? Okay, and some of that again could be based on maybe your work schedule, things that you have going on during the week. And some weeks you may have more time to exercise than others. Okay, so type, that is, again, what type of training, what type of exercise are you going to be doing? Is it cardiorespiratory? If so, what type? Is it cycling? Is it running? Is it swimming? With resistance training, are you doing strictly free weight exercises, compound multi-joint lifts, or are you doing machines, circuit style training? What type of exercise? Volume. So an example of volume with resistance training would be, this is just like the total number of sets, reps, load, the overall amount of work that you're doing within a single session. With cardiovascular exercise, aerobic endurance exercise, you can think of volume as, like mileage. For instance, if you're a runner, how many miles you're putting in a session or in a week. Those that are training for a marathon can easily be putting in a volume of 70, 80, even close to 100 miles in a week, okay, of training, a whole week. Progression then, your body's going to adapt to what you're doing. Okay, and so to continue to make positive adaptations, to improve your aerobic endurance, to improve your muscle strength and your muscle mass, and to keep losing body fat, you have to progress, right? You have to make your routine progressively harder. And so that's another factor to remember, right? You can't just keep doing the same thing and expect greater and greater results, right? So you have to progress it. All right, so continuing on with point 6 here, I'm just kind of getting into some guidelines that have been established by the American College of Sports Medicine for cardiorespiratory endurance. So again, activities like walking, swimming, jogging, cycling. So the guidelines, if you're performing moderate intensity cardiorespiratory endurance activities, and when I say moderate intensity, that's where you're exercising at 40 to 60% of your heart rate reserve. So it's going to be, lower heart rates than, say, more vigorous intensity exercise. So if you're working at this moderate intensity, it's recommended that you perform 5 days a week of aerobic or cardiorespiratory endurance exercise, 30 minutes per session. All right, so a practical example would be, for example, walking 1 3/4 miles, so 1.75 miles in 35 minutes. So you're averaging at that pace 20 minutes per mile, right? So again, that's moderate intensity. If you look here at vigorous intensity exercise, so this would be greater than 60% of your heart rate reserve, so you're exercising at higher heart rates. You'll see that the minutes per week, the recommended minutes per week is lower, right, compared to moderate intensity. So if you're exercising more vigorously, 75 to 150 minutes per week of vigorous intensity exercise at those higher heart rates. And you can divide that out across 4 days. This is just an example. 4 days, 20 minutes a session. So that would give you 80 minutes for the week, would fit right in that range. And a practical example there would be running the same distance that I gave that you walked before, 1 3/4 miles or 1.75 miles, in 20 minutes. So you're walking that same distance, or you're jogging, running that same distance that you walked, but in less time. So that means you're working at a higher intensity, a faster pace. And so you'd run that 1.75 miles in, say, 20 minutes, and you'd be looking at averaging about 11.4 minutes per mile. Whereas if you were walking at a lower intensity, you're covering that same distance, but at a 20-minute per mile pace. Okay, so there's this trade-off, right? And there should be a trade-off in your program between, like say, the time spent exercising and the intensity, right? So generally, if you're going to engage in a more intense cardiorespiratory workout, you're going to do it for a shorter time. If you're going to engage in a less intense cardiorespiratory endurance training session, then you'll do it for a longer period of time. Okay. All right. So continuing on with point number 6, getting into muscle strength and endurance guidelines. So what are the recommendations for improving muscle strength and endurance set by the American College of Sports Medicine? Again, these are general guidelines. 2 to 3 days per week is what's recommended, kind of as a minimum for improving muscle strength and endurance. As far as, so that's your frequency, right? As far as intensity, you're looking at lifting loads that you can perform between 8 and 12 reps, a load that's between 60 to 80% of your 1 repetition maximum. So just to keep things simple, if you could bench press 100 pounds, then you would want to perform 8 to 12 reps using a load that's between 60 to 80 pounds, right? Because that's 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max. Okay, so for older adults or novice beginning trainees that, again, are just starting out and haven't done any resistance training before, you start at a lighter percentage of your 1 repetition max, so anywhere from 40 to 50%. So again, this example would be, if your max is 100 pounds, 50 pounds for the bench, and you're doing more reps, right? So 15 to 25 reps. That way you kind of establish a fitness base, right? Before you progress over time to heavier loads and more sets, okay? Speaking of sets, you're looking at 1 to 4 sets per muscle group. And then you want to complete 8 to 10 exercises each session. So each time you go into the gym for those major muscle groups. So again, think of your major muscle groups, your legs, your quads, your arms, chest, your back. 8 to 10 exercises that include all those major muscle groups. Now there's different ways, and I'm going to cover this in a separate video of how to divide up your workouts across the week. So for instance, if you're only coming in twice a week, you may do a full body routine. You pick 8 to 10 exercises. You may do 1 or 2 exercises for chest, 1 or 2 for back, and then 1 or 2 for legs, 1 or 2 for abs, 1 or 2 exercises for your arms. So you're doing a full body routine, but you're only doing that twice a week. As you progress over time and you become more advanced at lifting, you'll probably start splitting up your routine to where you don't do your full body in a day. You may come in, say, 4 days a week, and Monday you do upper body lifts only, Tuesday lower body, Wednesday you rest, Thursday you do upper body lifts, Friday you do lower body, and on the weekend you rest. And some, for instance, bodybuilders that I've trained before, they were coming in 6 times a week, right? So we might do 3 days of lifting, take a day off. 3 days of lifting, take a day off. So for instance, they might come in Monday. We might do all their upper body muscles that are involved in pushing. So chest, triceps, shoulders. Tuesday, all their upper body muscles that are involved in pulling. So we would do, a variety of sets and exercises for the back, the biceps. And then Wednesday would be their leg workout. Okay, Thursday would be a rest day, and then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday we would repeat what we did on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, right? So Friday would be upper body push muscles, Saturday upper body pull muscles, Sunday lower extremity leg workout, and then that following week, Monday would be off. So again, a lot more volume of training. And in that case, if you're working with a bodybuilder, they're trying to maximize muscle growth. So you're doing a lot more volume, okay? And typically, we would be doing anywhere from, like, say they come in on their push day, their upper extremity push day on Monday, anywhere from right around 10 sets to 12 sets per muscle group. So they do 10 sets to 12 sets of just chest exercises on that day, right? And there's some research out there, hypertrophy research, that shows that to really optimize muscle hypertrophy, you need at least, to optimize it, 10 sets per muscle group per week, okay? Now, where the top is, it's not clear. Some individuals may do 20 or even 30 sets of a muscle group in a week. Generally, once you start getting above 10 sets in a session, you're going to need to spread that volume out. So, me, for instance, just to give an example, I do 12 sets of chest, but I do it twice a week. I do 12 sets of back exercises, but I do it twice a week. 12 sets for my legs, but it's twice a week. I wouldn't ever do 24 sets of chest exercises in a single session. Even though I've talked to people that do that, you're going to hit a point of diminishing returns where it's like, why are you doing so many sets in a single session? Spread that volume out over the week, right? And that'll allow you to train more intensely if you're spreading the volume out versus trying to pack in all those sets in one session, okay? Because at some point there's going to be some diminishing returns with the number of sets you perform in a workout. And that hasn't been determined yet, but there's research going on in that area, okay? But again, a lot of this is just, these are general guidelines for somebody that's starting out, okay? Obviously, the percentage or the intensity of load that you lift, if you're really wanting to maximize strength, you're going to progress to lifting heavier loads where you might be lifting loads that are less than, you lift a heavy load where you can perform only 1 to 5 reps, right? So you may be lifting at closer to 85, 90, 93% of your 1 repetition max. If you're really wanting to get stronger, well, you've got to lift heavier loads. I mean, that makes sense, right? So another point I want to make, just kind of going back to the muscle strength and endurance guidelines, is that, again, those are just guidelines, right? Kind of starting points. And as you progress and get stronger over time and you accumulate more muscle mass, your endurance becomes better, you're going to need to increase generally the load. You're going to need to add more volume, more sets, more reps, right? So you've got to progress over time. You can't just stick with the same routine and keep doing the same thing over and over again. So for example, an older adult, yeah, maybe you start at doing anywhere between 15 and 25 reps per set at a lighter load, 40 to 50% of your 1 rep max. But after several months, you're going to generally drop your reps down. You may go from 15 reps down to 12. You're adding weight. Then after a few more weeks go by, you go from 12 reps down to 10. You're adding weight, right? So as you add weight, your reps go down. It only makes sense that if you're lifting a heavier load, you're not going to be able to lift it as many times, right? And so you need to increase that load to continue improving your strength, right? And definitely strength is associated or correlated with a longer lifespan, improved ability to perform your activities of daily living, take care of yourself, take care of others, simple things like being able to do your laundry, get groceries, like that. Those are all important if you're an older adult. So that's why having adequate strength, it's not just for athletes. Muscle mass is not just for bodybuilders. Strength and muscle is important for longevity if you're an older adult, okay? So let's move on to the next, guideline here in these different fitness domains that I'm talking about. So it's going to be flexibility. Did I spell that right? Flexibility. All right. So here, the ACSM, we're going to recommend a minimum of 2 to 3 days a week of stretching, but you can do this daily, right? So you want to stay mobile, you can stretch daily. It's not like you're going to overtrain or do too much stretching. That would be hard to do. So again, something you can do daily, minimum 2 days, 2 to 3 days per week. So last point I want to make here that's tied in with point 6 is that for those of you that are athletes, again, you want to incorporate some other areas in that people that are not an athlete may not be thinking of. So again, things like improving your speed, your power, your agility, so your ability to change direction quickly, your coordination, and your balance. Obviously, those are all important for sports, pretty much no matter what sport you're participating in if you're an athlete. And I'd also say, balance training too, that's important for older adults, again, as I've mentioned previously, for fall prevention. Okay, so point number 7. Dedication is greater than motivation. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that you're not always going to feel motivated to go to the gym, to do your workout. Okay, so you're not always going to feel like doing it, but just remember, you're trying to stay dedicated to a new lifestyle. So that's why I'm saying dedication, being dedicated to your routine is actually more important than being motivated. And just realize that, like, you're not always going to feel like going. I've told people before, if I only went to the gym when I felt like it, I would probably only be in there maybe once a week. And that's not enough to get maybe twice a week. Maybe if I was a novice going in twice a week, I could see some progress. But I've been doing it long enough that twice a week, if I went from going, I go now maybe 5 to 6 days a week. If I went down to twice a week, I would probably regress, right? My strength levels, my endurance levels, my fitness level would probably regress a little bit. Depending on the routine I do, I might be able to maintain with twice a week, like a full body workout. But again, I've adapted to more volume, more frequency. And, I go to the gym. I stick to my routine. I try to, even when I may not feel motivated. So just getting there is half the battle. And a lot of times, once I get in there and get going, even on those days I don't feel motivated, once I get going, some of the beta endorphins, some of that dopamine, some of the different neurotransmitters in the brain's released. I get that epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the adrenaline circulating in my blood. I start to feel pretty good, and I wake up and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go now. So again, just realize that, like, you're not always going to feel like going, but really try to stick with your routine. Because it's going to be a key part of your success, right? Again, training consistently is so key, and to stay consistent, again, there's going to be days you don't feel motivated, but again, you can really start having some detraining effects and not progressing like you should if you just decide to not go. And it becomes a habit. It gets easier once you say, I don't feel like it today. Then you wake up the next day, I'm going to take another day off. And then before you know it, it's like you've had 2 or 3 weeks off and you're losing all that progress that you've made. All right, point number 8, often overlooked. A lot of us struggle with this. I mean, we all know this. Get plenty of sleep, okay? So, if you're not getting plenty of sleep, again, most people, you need 6 to 8 hours. Generally, as you get older, you don't sleep as much, but, a good solid 8 hours, yeah, that's kind of standard. What is sleep deprivation associated with? Well, increased weight, so gains in weight. Put hormones here. So hormone imbalances, right? So if you're not getting enough sleep, typically a lot of the hormone imbalances you see are linked into the weight gain. So there may be, changes in, for instance, your cortisol levels, right? Maybe you're stressed out throughout the day. Again, you're having trouble sleeping at night. Your cortisol levels are high. What's funny about cortisol is in the short term, cortisol levels that are high in the blood, again, cortisol is a hormone released from your adrenal gland, these little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. In the short term, they actually promote lipolysis, or the breakdown of fat. But if your cortisol levels are consistently high, like if they just don't ever come down, you're stressed, just chronically stressed, high cortisol levels over the long term can actually lead to some weight gain. You tend to see higher blood sugar levels, and then if your blood sugar levels are staying high as a result of your cortisol being high, because cortisol tells the liver to dump out glucose into the blood, if your blood sugar is staying high consistently, then you may start developing some insulin resistance. That could lead into diabetes, and increased weight and diabetes, they're associated. So again, that's just one example of one hormone. I could go into a bunch of them. And again, if you're a male, you're not getting enough rest, your testosterone levels are lower, and that could impact your ability, again, to recover from exercise, build muscle, things like that. At night you release growth hormone to help repair and rebuild your body. So again, there's a lot of hormones that can be affected if you're not getting enough sleep. All right. Also, you're just going to be in a fatigued state if you're not getting enough sleep. So, let's say, for instance, it's a Friday night. Maybe you're out late with friends at dinner or whatever. You got home late. Maybe you only got 3 or 4 hours of sleep. Maybe you have a young child at home, right? You're not sleeping a lot. 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And then you try to go in and exercise the next day, probably not going to be able to exercise or train very intensely. If those days start accumulating over the weeks, months, it's really impacting your training session. So it's harder to make progress if you're training in a fatigued state, okay? So I guess which kind of tied into my next point, this fatigue is tied in with reduced training intensity, right? So those are linked together. So we can say irritability and also mood swings, right? Sleep deprivation. And the last thing, decreased immune function, right? So again, your immune system, you're just more likely to get sick. You're going to have more trouble fighting off, any microorganisms, viruses, bacteria, if you're, just not getting enough sleep. So again, a decline in the immune system function. Point number 9. Be wise in choosing what to drink. All right. So, sugary beverages. So try to reduce or eliminate those. And when I talk about sugary beverages, things like, obviously, soda pop. It's very high in high fructose corn syrup. Your liver has kind of a heck of a time dealing with fructose. It can more easily get converted to triglyceride and fat than some other forms of carbohydrate. So overall, decrease your soda intake. I think a lot of people could, agree with that. It's kind of common knowledge. Also, with sugary drinks, I think one that's some people may overlook and they think they're healthy is fruit juice. If you have a young child that's drinking a lot of fruit juice, it tends to be pretty high in sugar. It's better to just eat whole fruit than to eat or to drink fruit juices, okay? They tend to be very sugary, all right? Also then, alcohol. So, again, limit your alcohol intake, moderate it. Maybe if you really want to get strict, totally, eliminate it. Remember, one thing with alcohol is there's 7 calories per gram of alcohol. So if you are drinking frequently or you're having a few drinks on the weekend, it can really, in addition to whatever meals you're eating, it really can up the total calories that you're taking in, and you kind of don't see it, right? If you see a big plate of food, yeah, you see calories, but you start having a few drinks, you don't realize there's 7 calories, right, per gram of alcohol. So it can promote weight gain pretty fast, all right, if you're not limiting the intake of it. Of course, we'll put H2O, water, increase your water consumption. That makes sense. One of the reasons why I think it's important to increase water consumption, well, obviously there's no calories in it, so you can drink it as much as you want, but it can help you feel full. And one thing that you've got to realize is that in the brain, there's a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. It's down deep in the brain. And the hypothalamus really detects when you're thirsty or hungry. It has a lot of other autonomic functions too, controls things that you don't have to consciously think about. But it's your thirst and hunger centers are located there in the hypothalamus. And sometimes, I used to give this tip to my clients when I was a personal trainer. If you feel hungry, you may actually be dehydrated because those hunger and thirst centers are right there, kind of next door neighbors in the hypothalamus. So I'd always encourage my clients when I was training them, I'd say, hey, just, if you're feeling hungry, drink a couple glasses of water, wait about 30 minutes, see if you're still hungry, right? If you're not hungry after 30 minutes, you probably were just dehydrated. If you are still hungry, well, yeah, then you probably need to eat, okay? But again, sometimes the hunger and thirst centers, they kind of get confused, right? You may just be dehydrated, but your body, you're feeling hungry, okay? So again, just a tip with increasing your water intake there. And of course, if you're dehydrated, you're not going to be able to exercise as intensely, as long. So obviously it's important to stay hydrated so that your training sessions are going to be more effective and you're going to be able to train at higher intensities, all right? Then also, next drink that I want to talk about, or beverage, is chocolate milk, all right? So chocolate milk is a great post-workout recovery drink, all right? So assuming you're not lactose intolerant, right? So assuming you don't have a lack of the lactase enzyme in your GI tract, which lactase is the enzyme that helps break down lactose, which is milk sugar, I highly recommend drinking chocolate milk or whole milk after a workout, right? So a lot of people do like a whey protein shake after a workout. That's fine too. If you don't have any whey protein or you don't eat a high protein meal after your workouts, chocolate milk is great. And it's not only great for protein, but it's got adequate carbohydrates. So of course the protein is going to help rebuild muscle. Carbohydrates, you burn carbohydrates when you exercise, right? So you store carbohydrate as glycogen in your muscles and in your liver, and you burn through that when you're exercising. And chocolate milk has an adequate amount of carbohydrate in it to help replace some of that glycogen that you burn through in your muscle when you're exercising, right? That glycogen is like the fuel that your muscle uses when you exercise. Also, chocolate milk has pretty good concentration of various electrolytes, so sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Those electrolytes are important for obviously muscle function, function of the nervous system, and you sweat out a lot of electrolytes, especially sodium, when you're exercising, so you want to replace those electrolytes. A lot of people think you lose a lot of potassium. You lose some, but you actually lose more sodium when you're training than potassium. Also, chocolate milk's high in vitamins A and D. So I typically recommend post-workout that you drink 16 ounces of chocolate milk to, again, help promote recovery after exercise. Tip number 10, be wise in choosing what to eat. So it makes sense. We talked about making smart choices with what you drink. Now, what are you going to chomp on? So again, it's baby steps here. Like I said, with physical activity and exercise, you've got to slowly progress that over time. Start out, like I said, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You may start out exercising a couple days a week, and then you progress it over time. Now, with choosing what to eat, this is baby steps again. So you make small changes to your diet each day and each week. What I see is a lot of times people get really excited and they're really motivated to get fit, get in shape, and they just want to make all these huge changes all at once. And then the problem is they tend to rebound, relapse. They can't stick with it, right? So they may stick with it for 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, maybe a couple months. But at some point, because they've made so many changes all at once, right at the beginning, it's difficult to maintain. So just small changes over time, okay? Each day, each week, and you just incorporate a new small change each day or each week, and you start to build, okay, over time. Eat healthy whole foods, right? So as far as meat, your chicken, turkey, beef, fish, especially fatty fish like salmon, that's going to have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids in it. So omega-3 fatty acids help support cardiovascular health. Eggs, whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes. So that's things like beans and peas are going to have some fiber in them. Yogurt, milk, fruits, and vegetables, right? So that's a long list of items. Now I know some of you may be vegan or vegetarian. You may not eat some of those items. But again, the common theme there is just to choose whole foods, all right? And when you go to the grocery store, this is an important point. I always tell people to shop the perimeter, right? What do you find on the perimeter of the grocery store? Well, a lot of those whole foods I just named, right? Your chicken, the different meats, your milk, your eggs, your produce, right? That's all on the perimeter of the grocery store, right? If you get into the middle aisles, that's where more of your processed, refined foods that typically have really long ingredient lists, some of the ingredients you can't even pronounce, you've never heard of before. So your more refined processed foods tend to be centrally located, right? So if you look at your grocery cart, you should have more items in there from the perimeter than from the central part of the grocery store, okay? Each meal, if you look at your plate, so if you draw your plate out and you think of it, if you just split it in half of it should be vegetables and whole fruit, right? So vegetables and fruit are very nutrient dense, right? They have a lot of vitamins and minerals, so they're nutrient dense, but they're not calorie dense, right? So a calorie dense food would be like maybe a fried food. It's got a lot of calories, but not a lot of like vitamins and minerals. Obviously, fruits, vegetables, they're lower in calories, right? But they're more nutrient dense, okay? So speaking of fruit and vegetables, of course, eat plenty of dark leafy greens, incorporate a variety of fruit and vegetables into your diet, and think of eating a variety of colors, right? So different colors of vegetables, different colors of fruit, all right? Because they all have, for instance, if you look at a red bell pepper, if you look at carrots, they're going to have high levels of like beta carotene. So colors, you're getting with different colors, different vitamins, different minerals, all right? So just eat a variety. Eliminate or reduce highly processed and refined foods. So again, things like breakfast cereals, cake, donuts, cookies, all these things we love to eat, chips, french fries, bread, microwave meals, sausage, right? I mean, again, we all love eating these. Just, you may not totally eliminate it. Just make small changes. Eat a little bit less, right? Okay. Again, these foods are all high in salt, sugars, preservatives, low in vitamins and low in minerals, and they tend to not be very satiating. And what do I mean by that? Foods that are high on the satiety index, they promote a feeling of fullness, right? So your whole foods are going to promote satiety, or foods that are, say, high in fiber, foods that are high in protein. High protein foods promote satiety. They promote you feeling full, so you're not as apt to eat as often and as frequently. Whereas a lot of your processed refined foods, they're very low on the satiety index. So, for instance, let's say you have a bowl of, breakfast cereal in the morning, some Frosted Flakes. I used to love Frosted Flakes when I was a kid. Again, that's a refined processed cereal. It's not very high on the satiety index. You're going to probably feel hungry within maybe a couple hours. You're going to want to eat more, right? And if you eat, again, in a couple hours, some other processed refined food, maybe have a couple donuts later that morning, again, you're going to feel full pretty soon after that, okay? So a lot of these refined foods, they taste great. They're highly palatable, but they don't promote satiety. And they don't promote a feeling of fullness, so you're more apt to eat, frequently throughout the day. Okay. Also, when you're shopping, if a food item has a lengthy ingredient list, I kind of mentioned this before. You look at that food item, this box of cookies or crackers or whatever you have, and it's got this long, lengthy ingredient list. A lot of the ingredients you can't even pronounce or haven't seen before. It's probably not very healthy for you. Okay, so limit the consumption of those items. Eat plenty of fiber. So again, what are sources of fiber? Vegetables, fruit, oats, beans, peas, brown rice, whole grains. Those are all sources of fiber. And there's actually two types, insoluble and soluble. Soluble fiber kind of turns into a gel in your colon, kind of softens your stool, makes it easier to obviously defecate, go to the bathroom. Insoluble fiber is going to help kind of push things along and kind of act as a street sweeper going through the colon. So again, this is important for your digestive health, right? Fiber benefits. Fiber promotes satiety. So foods that are high in fiber, it slows the movement of food through the upper gastrointestinal tract. So it kind of delays the emptying of food out of the stomach into the small intestine, which makes you feel full for a longer period of time because that food is moving more slowly through there, all right? Whereas low fiber foods tend to move through very quickly, your stomach empties fast, and then you're hungry again. All right, and so in that way, it may reduce your desire to eat as often and may help promote weight loss if you're eating more high fiber foods. Now, once you get fiber into the lower part of the GI tract and into the colon, it's generally going to help with the passage of feces, but it's a good thing to have a high fiber diet because for colon health, it's been shown that there's a lower risk of colorectal cancer in those individuals that are consuming a higher fiber diet. All right. Also, fiber can help control your blood sugar levels, which would lower the risk of diabetes, and also it can help control cholesterol levels and lower blood cholesterol levels, which may then reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease. So what are fiber recommendations? And they're a little different for males and females. So for males, it's recommended that you consume, I'm sorry, made a mistake there. I was writing that. I was like, no, I know it's more for males. 38 grams a day. And for females, 25 grams per day. So that's your fiber recommendation. And most people do not hit that mark, male or female. So I'd say for the majority of Americans, they're quite a ways under that guideline, that minimum guideline. All right, so continuing on here with tip number 10. In addition to eating more fiber, you should boost up your protein intake. So remember, there's 3 macronutrients that provide fuel to the body. There's carbohydrates, there's protein, and there's fat in the food that you eat. Out of all of those, protein is going to provide the greatest effect on satiety. Okay, so protein is going to help you feel full for longer. I think one of the main problems with the American diet is that it's high in both carbohydrate and fat. Okay, and a diet that's high in carbohydrate and fat is what's called atherogenic. It tends to promote atherosclerosis, right? The formation of fatty plaques inside the lining of your blood vessels, and the formation of those fatty plaques, obviously that's associated with high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease. So again, the Western diet, the American diet, it's atherogenic because it's high in both carbohydrate and fat, okay? And that atherogenic diet, again, if you just look at the American diet in general, it's associated with not only cardiovascular disease, but obesity, diabetes, poor blood glucose levels, a lot of issues. If you're doing a very low carb diet, So let's say that you're beginning this fitness journey and you're like, oh, I want to do low carb, like a keto diet. And I could go on a lot of tangents about diets, but let's say you decide to do keto. So that keto is like less than 50 grams of carbohydrate per day. So that's like 3 slices of bread. Okay. If you're doing low carb, and I'm not going to say that one diet's, quote, diet is better or worse than the other. I mean, some of these more restrictive diets, you're more at risk of getting some nutrient deficiencies, especially like with vitamins and minerals and stuff. But there's a lot of diets that could be used to lose body fat and decrease weight. But a lot of them, because they're so restrictive, they're hard to adhere to, right? And because you can't adhere to them over time, it makes it difficult to, keep your weight at a healthy level or continue to drop pounds if you're overweight or obese. So dietary adherence is key in losing weight. And if you're on a really restrictive diet like keto, it may be hard to stick to that. You may be able to stick to it for a while, but it's hard. So, but if you are doing keto, because I wanted to give an example here. So you're eating very low carbohydrate. You can take in, obviously you're going to take in higher amounts of fat, okay? If you significantly increase your carbohydrate intake, so some people, especially athletes, may be doing high carb diet, so greater than 65% of their calories may be coming from carbohydrate, then you're going to want to drop your fat intake. So there's this inverse relationship that I generally recommend people follow, inverse between carbohydrate and fat. Okay, so if your carbohydrate intake is high, greater than 65% of your total daily calories coming from carbohydrate, you need to keep your fat intake low. If your fat intake is high, like on keto, 75% or more of your calories are going to be coming from fat, and less than 5% or less coming from carbohydrate. Yeah, you can eat higher fat as long as your carbs are low. It's the combination of high fat, high carbs. That's bad. That's what you see in the Western diet. No matter what, no matter how you're eating, always keep your protein high, okay? Always. I would say overall, the restrictive diets, like I said, are tough to stick to. So just eat a variety of whole foods, balance, right? Just try to achieve balance in your diet, right? You want a balanced intake. Balance of protein, high protein. I'd say for most Americans, moderate carb, lower fat, low to moderate fat. Again, there's a yin and yang between the carb and fat intake, but always keep your protein high and just eat a variety of foods, okay? If we look at protein recommendations, so these are, again, general guidelines, okay? You're looking at, we'll write this here, 10 to 35% of your total daily calories coming from protein. Or if you want to talk about grams of protein, if you're a sedentary individual, so sedentary individuals typically need 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, all right? And if you're trying to figure your weight in kilograms, take your weight in pounds and divide by 2.2, all right? So for me, it'd be, I'm 175 pounds, divide that by 2.2, that's my weight in kilograms. And if I was sedentary, I'd multiply that weight in kilograms by 0.8, and that would give me the intake for a sedentary individual. Now, I'm not sedentary. I take in more protein than that because, again, that's helping me recover, repair muscles after exercise, things like that. So individuals that are training, so exercising individuals, how much should they take in? Typically, 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram per day. Or that's about 1 gram per pound of body weight per day, okay? Because 1 kilogram equals 2.2 pounds. So you're looking at taking in about 1 gram per pound of body weight per day if you're exercising, training. Now, you can take in higher than that, all right? It's not going to be an issue. They used to think, well, and I've had clients ask me this when I was a trainer, well, is it going to be hard on my kidneys if I, bump my protein intake to say, 3 or 4 grams per kilogram per day? And no, it's not going to cause a problem with your kidneys. If your kidneys are healthy, you're fine. Now, in individuals that do have kidney disease, they typically do keep the protein intake lower. But again, there's a difference between, you having healthy kidneys, you're going to be fine, versus having kidneys that have been damaged due to, say, years of high blood pressure or other issues. In those individuals, they tend to keep protein intake lower. But again, protein intake, keep it high. It's going to promote satiety. And also, obviously, it's important for a variety of processes in your body. Another thing to keep in mind is that you should consume meals 25 to 35 grams of protein at each meal. Okay, so this amount of protein is going to help to support muscle protein synthesis and muscle health, consuming 25 to 35 grams each time you eat. And, there's this, I hear this a lot. People say, well, you can only absorb a certain number of grams. It's not. There's a difference between absorb and muscle protein synthesis, right? So you're going to absorb all the protein that you eat. Absorption refers to the movement of the amino acids that make up the protein from the gut, from the small intestine into the bloodstream. You're going to absorb all the protein you eat in a day. But at any one time, at any meal, only around 20 to 30 or 25 to 30 grams of that protein, that's kind of your top end for supporting muscle protein synthesis, right? So it's not like if you ate 50 grams of protein at one setting, you're going to get more muscle protein synthesis than if you're just stuck to this range, right? So you kind of have a cap on that each time you sit down to eat, okay? So looking at the next macronutrient here, continuing on with number 10, is carbohydrate recommendations. So again, think of where you find carbohydrate: breads, pasta, things like that, cereals, rice. Carbohydrate recommendations: most Americans, again, like I said, need to lower their carbohydrate intake. And this is the range that's recommended. 45 to 65% of your total daily calories should come from carbohydrate. I recommend, a lot of Americans are eating on the higher side, 65, even greater than that. I recommend staying on the lower side, 45% or even less, right? You can go less than that. Obviously when you drop your carbs down, your protein's got to stay high. As carbs drop, your fat would go up, right? Now, for athletes, the recommendation for carbohydrates is going to be higher, especially aerobic endurance athletes, because they burn through a lot of carbohydrate. And remember, carbohydrate is stored as muscle glycogen, or stored as glycogen in your muscle and liver. So they burn through a ton of that with all the miles and the aerobic exercise, the long periods of extended training, right? So they need a greater amount per day than the average sedentary American, all right? So athletes can take in, if we're looking at a percentage of total daily calories, their percentage of total daily calories coming from carbohydrate should be greater than 65%. It should be anywhere from 65 to 70% of their total daily calories coming from carbohydrate, because again, they're using that as a fuel source, when they're training. If we look at the type of carbohydrates to take in, try to avoid the intake of refined carbohydrates and sugars. Your more processed, refined sugars can tend to promote increased triglyceride formation. They can alter your blood lipid profile, negatively affect, again, basically the fats that are in your blood, and that may promote cardiovascular disease. So if we look at guidelines here in grams per kilogram per day, if you don't want to go off a percentage, sedentary individuals should consume 2 to 4 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram per day. Again, staying on the low end here for sedentary individuals. Exercising individuals, if you're a strength or power athlete, maybe you're a power lifter, maybe you're a football player, a sprinter, 5 to 6 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight per day is recommended. And again, how do you figure your body weight in kilograms? Take your weight in pounds, divide by 2.2. You would take that number and multiply by 5 or 6, okay? Aerobic endurance athletes. So, again, maybe you're training for a half marathon or a marathon. You're putting in a lot of miles each week. You're really burning through glycogen. You need to replenish that glycogen, okay? And it typically takes about 24 hours if you severely deplete your glycogen in your muscle cells and liver to completely replenish that, okay? In strength and power athletes, if you lift weights for an hour, you may only decrease your glycogen by 40% or so in your muscles. So you don't need to take in as much to replenish that carbohydrate, that stored glycogen in your muscle, as compared to an aerobic endurance athlete that may be running, for an hour and 15 minutes continuously. They're burning through a lot more glycogen, so they have a higher daily need. So you're looking at 7 to 10 grams of glycogen per kilogram of body weight per day if you're an aerobic endurance athlete. One other thing I want to add with aerobic endurance athletes is that this recommendation of 7 to 10 grams per kilogram per day of carbohydrate, this is for aerobic endurance athletes that are engaging in training sessions that are longer than 90 minutes in duration, right? So, if you were on a shorter run and maybe it was only, a 45-minute run, yeah, you wouldn't want to take in as many grams of carbohydrate that day. But on those days you go on those longer runs, that long, slow distance training, greater than 90 minutes, that's where you would really want to bump your carbohydrate intake up into this range anytime you're exercising on a day for more than 90 minutes continuously. All right, the last macronutrient to discuss here on point or tip number 10 and choosing what to eat. We looked at carbs, we looked at protein. Now we got to talk about fat. So what are the general recommendations for the percentage of total daily calories that come from fat? So your percentage of calories coming from fat each day should be between what's recommended 20 to 35%. Now, that fat percentage could obviously be higher, like if you were doing a keto diet, because your carbohydrate intake by default on that diet would be lower, right? So again, you could go above that range if you're eating less carbs, right? Just remember, they're always going in opposite directions, right? Your fat intake can be higher if your carbs are lower. Your carb intake, maybe you're an athlete, can be higher, but your fat, you can drop your fat lower. So again, just general recommendations. You don't want to eat a diet that's too low in fat because it can actually negatively affect the production of certain hormones, okay? So again, you don't want to have less than 15% of your daily caloric intake. You don't want your fat intake to drop below that 15% of your total daily calories, okay? So for instance, cholesterol often gets demonized, and you're going to find typically cholesterol in, animal products. Maybe it's a steak, hamburger, but we actually form many hormones from cholesterol. So it's important to have some intake to support that production of, for instance, estrogen and testosterone and cortisol and a lot of different hormones we actually make from cholesterol. So you don't want to have too low of a dietary fat and cholesterol intake. Now, also to avoid fatty acid deficiency, this is kind of a bare minimum. If we're looking, instead of percentages, we're looking at grams. So between 0.5 to 1 gram of fat should be consumed per kilogram of body weight per day. All right. And that's again to avoid an essential fatty acid deficiency. So again, some of the essential fatty acids, they're essential because we don't make them. We've got to obtain them from the diet. If you dip too low below that, you could run into that fatty acid deficiency there. So again, that's the bare minimum range. Okay, so tip number 11. Understand that there is no magic diet. All right. There's a lot of fad diets out there. People hear, oh, there's carnivore, or, there's paleo, there's keto. There's so many different dietary approaches out there. Like I said, I think the best way to eat is just balanced overall, and always, keeping your protein high, your fiber intake high, and think about your carbs and fat. If one's high, drop the other. But there are some common, quote, diets, or let's just say, ways of eating that appear to be healthier than others that are supported by research. And one of those is the Mediterranean diet. So you think about how folks in Greece would eat. The Mediterranean diet is known to be heart healthy. So in a Mediterranean diet, you're going to be eating lots of whole grains, seafood, so fish, beans, nuts, fruits, vegetables, and plenty of olive oil, which is high in healthy polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fatty acids. So again, Mediterranean diet, that's a great way of eating. Definitely heart healthy. Personally, if I can speak to a diet that I've done before that I felt great on was the paleo or Paleolithic diet. So it's basically you're eating like a caveman or a cave woman. So anything that you could kill in the wild as a caveman or cave woman, or basically pull off of a tree, you eat. So the one thing about this diet is it really helps you to avoid processed foods, right? And again, this kind of ties back in with shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. So in this diet, you're going to eat a lot of meat, fish, seafood, eggs, vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds. Again, you're really avoiding a lot of processed foods with that diet. You do get, it is typically lower in carbohydrate, so you will get some carbohydrate cravings there. But again, I felt great because I thought, it really helped me to cut out processed foods. I think I did it for, several years ago for maybe 6 months, and I did see pretty significant changes in my body composition. I felt full between meals. You do have to realize, though, because you are eating, quite a bit of meat, like there's going to be more preparation with food. So might want to meal prep, plan out some of your meals, prepare them ahead of time on the weekend before you get into the week. Now, with some of these more restrictive diets, like I said, keto's pretty restrictive. There's the carnivore diet, which is just like all meat, eating organs. That's it. Like there's no plants in that diet. Typically in those more restrictive diets, they're difficult to adhere to. You may be more likely to suffer nutrient deficiencies in just a specific vitamin or mineral if you don't take a supplement in addition to the foods that you're taking in with those various diets. So again, the more restrictive you get, like keto, a vegan or vegetarian diet, carnivore, more likely to see some deficiencies in nutrient intake. And again, they're tough to adhere to over the long haul. So I'm a fan of just eating a balanced diet. Moving on to tip number 12. Remember, calories in versus calories out, right? And so you may have different goals depending on what you want to achieve. So for weight, I like to say fat loss, because what people really mean when they say weight loss is they want to lose fat, right? Typically, we don't want to lose muscle weight. We want to lose weight as fat, right? So for weight or fat loss, decrease your daily caloric intake by 500, no more than 500 calories. So between 250 to 500 calories. That will help promote the loss of fat, but you're not in such a deficit where you start losing muscle in addition to the fat, right? So you don't want to create too large of a deficit. Now, if you're extremely overweight or obese, you can create a larger deficit safely, okay? So for those that are extremely overweight or obese, I would say drop your calories down by 500 to 1,000 each day, okay? So those are the guidelines for weight, right? Specifically fat, decreasing fat loss. Now let's say that, I know like me, when I was coming out of high school and I got a football scholarship, I think I was only around 140, 145 pounds. I needed to gain weight, right? And there's some big boys out there, I found out real quick playing junior college football. So I needed to put on weight. It was like I was quick, I was fast, but I needed to get stronger. I needed to build some muscle. So I needed to gain weight. And some of you may be trying to achieve that. That may be one of your goals is so for muscle gain, so increasing muscle mass, muscle gain, what are the guidelines there? You want to eat in a surplus. So here we're in a deficit for weight loss. Here we're eating in a caloric surplus, right? We need to take in more calories than we expend each day. So we're in a caloric surplus. Here you're taking in less calories than what you would be needed, what you would need to take in to maintain weight. You're going to take in less than that and create a deficit to lose weight. Here we need to take in more each day. So typically you want to increase your intake of calories by 250 to 500 calories. It's just kind of the opposite of what you would do to lose weight. Another simple way, this is a very rough estimate. If you're trying to decide, man, how many calories should I take in per day to gain muscle? Just take your body weight in pounds, so your body weight in pounds, and multiply it by 16.5. And I'm stealing this. This is a recommendation by Dr. Mike Israetel. He runs Renaissance Periodization, but this is accurate. This is good. Take your body weight in pounds, so I'd be 175, multiply that by 16.5, and that gives you the number of calories that you should take in each day. It's a rough estimate to gain muscle mass. Hopefully it's predominantly muscle, but not a lot of fat. Okay, so that's just a rough estimate. Like I said, it's not exact, precise, but it's going to get you in the ballpark. So tip 13, find a gym you feel comfortable training at. All right. So again, you got a lot of options for gyms. It could be private studio. You know, maybe it's a personal trainer that operates their own private gym. Typically going to be smaller, less people in there, or there's obviously the large big box gyms like a Genesis, a Planet Fitness, Lifetime. So these are larger. There's going to be a lot more people in there. And the reason I mentioned the number of people in there is because sometimes people, if you're trying to get started working out and living this healthier lifestyle, you obviously you need to exercise in addition to eating better, but it's like you're intimidated by the gym. So you may not feel comfortable going into a big box gym like a Genesis or a Lifetime or a Planet Fitness. You may feel more comfortable in a private studio. I will say that for the most part, like I've said before, is most people at the gym are really friendly and don't feel intimidated, because at one point they were in your shoes. Everybody had to start out. And so people can relate to that, right? They're going to know, oh, you're new. You're just starting into this, fitness journey, and they've been there before. All right. So, and they likely have similar goals as you do, right? So you're kind of all in the same boat, so to speak. So just keep those things in mind, but it does help if you can find a gym that you feel comfortable at and you're going to be able to keep going back to. Number 14, if needed, hire a personal trainer. Look for someone that's certified and, somebody that, hasn't just printed their certification off the internet. So look for somebody that has a certification through the National Strength and Conditioning Association, somebody that's like a certified personal trainer or certified strength and conditioning specialist through the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Anybody that's certified through the American College of Sports Medicine or through the American Council of Exercise or through NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. Those are all qualified, going to be qualified good personal trainers. They should be. I guess I should say sometimes certified doesn't mean qualified, but they've at least shows they've passed an exam to become a trainer, right? So again, why might you hire a personal trainer? They're going to help you set goals. They may be able to identify some weaknesses that you weren't even aware of. Conduct fitness assessments on you and exercise testing to determine your current fitness level before you start the program. And then, they should be reassessing your fitness level it can vary every 2 to 3 months just to see how you're improving. And then that can help them know how to adjust your program. They'll design an exercise program for you. You may not know how to do this. You're just lost. You're overwhelmed. You've heard so many different recommendations. A trainer can do that for you. You're hiring them. That's part of why you're hiring them. They can obviously show you how to perform various exercises, explain the technique, muscles used, why you're doing it. They'll demonstrate it. They should be able to do all of that. Okay, so that'll help you become more comfortable in the gym and performing all the different exercises there are. Again, machines, equipment, showing you how to operate all that, provide nutritional advice. Okay, so a lot of different things here that you can get help with if you hire a trainer, and also just motivation, right? I mean, it's again kind of like working out with a partner, but in this case, it's a partner who's very educated or should be very educated that can guide you and help you improve, right? And obviously, you're going to be paying for those services, and it's going to help hold you accountable to coming in, 2, 3, 4, however many times you're meeting with your trainer per week. 15, master your exercise technique before increasing the load, or remember, we can refer to load as the intensity, okay? And this makes sense, right? I mean, especially if you haven't been training before. For instance, you're new to resistance training. You obviously want to master the movement with lighter loads, or in some cases, like if it's a barbell exercise, just the bar. You want to master that movement and the coordination and proper technique so that you don't injure yourself before you start loading and adding on a significant amount of weight, right? It's obviously, if you're starting out, you want to load the exercise, but just lighter loads, and don't ever load dysfunctional movement patterns, right? So you learn the proper technique, the proper movement pattern, and then as you become accustomed to the movement and the exercise, you progressively load it with more and more weight, slowly each week over time. All right, so next, it's important to slowly progress your exercise program over time. So, for instance, every 1 to 2 weeks, to continue increasing or improving your fitness level. All right, so again, you don't want to progress too fast, right? Then you may risk injury, or maybe you're doing too much volume too soon. You may risk overtraining, but you've got to slowly progress at some point and make things more difficult for yourself, because you're going to adapt and plateau to the routine that you're currently doing. So again, every 1 or 2 weeks, there's different ways that you can do this. Typically, I recommend that you increase volume before intensity. So like with resistance exercise, what does that mean? Well, you would increase the number of reps and sets, the volume, with lighter loads. Then later, you increase the load or the intensity by 5 to 10 pound increments for upper body exercises and 10 to 20 pound increments for lower body exercises. Now, if you're an advanced trainee, you've been doing resistance training for a while, you can make bigger jumps. You can add more weight quicker. But again, this is just general guidelines for somebody starting out. Now with cardiorespiratory exercise, cardiovascular exercise, aerobic endurance exercise, however you want to refer to it, how would you progress? Well, again, increase your volume first. That's what I generally recommend. So this would mean, increase the distance you walk or the distance you jog, cycle, or swim, right? Increase the distance first. As the weeks roll by, you're increasing distance. Then you kind of build this aerobic base, right? This base level of conditioning. Then you start working on increasing the intensity, the heart rate that you exercise at, right? So you start exercising at higher percentages of your max heart rate, for instance. Don't ever try to increase, whether it's resistance training or aerobic endurance training, don't try to increase the intensity and the volume at the same time, like say on the same day. As the weeks progress and the days progress, if you're going to increase intensity, don't increase the volume. If you're going to increase volume, don't increase the intensity. So you just don't want it to be too much for your body all at once. Number 17, don't compare yourself to others. All right. So again, just for your mental health, just focus on becoming the healthiest, fittest version of yourself, right? And it's hard. I get it. It's hard. You go to the gym, you're going to see some really fit people, but remember, they've probably been doing this consistently for years, and you're going to say, man, I want to look like that. I just wish I could be like that. Like, just don't. You will get there. Focus on you. Focus on making these small improvements every day over time. You can get there, right? Because they had to start at some point too. So just don't compare yourself. I think it can be motivating. Maybe you see somebody, kind of look up to them, like, man, I want to achieve that level of fitness. Okay, if it motivates you, that's good, but don't get down on yourself because of it. And it's especially hard with, social media and people posting photos, and you see, it's just, what's an ideal body type? Like, just don't get caught up in that. Just focus, do this for you. Become healthy and fit because it's important for your life. It's important for you to live a long and healthy life. Maybe you have kids, you have family members, like, do this for you and forget about everybody else unless those people provide motivation for you to stick with your new lifestyle. Okay, 18. It's important to know that you cannot spot reduce body fat. Right? So you can't spot reduce trouble areas, right? So maybe you're a guy. I know as I've gotten older, I've started to hold a little more weight in the midsection. If I just, get down here on the floor and start doing a bunch of crunches and, bicycles and, ab exercises, I'm not going to reduce the fat that overlies my abdominal muscles, right? So you're not going to burn fat locally just because the muscle tissue is contracting underneath it, all right? So really, when you start losing weight or losing fat, your body loses it as a sheet, right? And so remember, to lose fat, obviously you've got to be in a slight caloric deficit. You can achieve that through your diet, and also exercise can help you achieve a caloric deficit as well, because you're obviously expending calories. But it's not like you burn fat from specific trouble areas because you're working the muscle in that region. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You burn fat across the entire body. Body regions you lose fat from first or last, that's primarily determined by genetics and your sex. I know when I worked with female clients, typically the areas that most females are going to complain about and ask if they can spot reduce is like hips, thighs, glutes, and also the back of the upper arm. I remember I had a lady that used to come in and say, and she was an older lady, probably in her 70s or even maybe 80s, but she'd say, I'm just tired of waving twice at people. I wave here and I wave back here. And she was asking, she wanted to get rid of the fat on the back of her arm. And it's like, well, we can't just sit here and do arm exercises and burn that fat off. It's like it's going to come down over time as a result of you being in a caloric deficit, and your body just loses fat kind of as a sheet. But still, it's important to obviously do those arm exercises to strengthen the muscle underneath the fat, right? There are two different types of tissue, muscle and fat, okay? In males, trouble areas in guys, tend to be trunk, fat in the trunk and the abdominal area. So again, just common sites, common spots that people complain about. All right, number 19. If you want to look tone, quote tone, right? So as an exercise scientist, when I hear tone, the definition of tone is a muscle's passive resistance to stretch. But in the gym, if I hear somebody talking about they want to look tone, it's totally different meaning, right? I know what it means when they say that, and most of you all do too. It's like if someone comes to you and is like, I just want a tone look, that means they want to have some muscle and they need their body fat down low enough to where you see that muscle and they have a nice shape to their body, right? So how do you achieve that? And I mean, women, I'm kind of talking to you here because I would always hear from female clients, not always, but a lot of the times, I just want to be toned and, I don't want to be too big. Well, don't be scared of lifting moderate to heavy weights. You need that stimulus to build muscle, okay? So don't be scared of the weights. You're not going to start looking like a man unless maybe you started taking exogenous testosterone and hormones, but don't worry about that. The muscle that you build from lifting those moderate to heavy loads is going to give you shape to your body, right? And that's part of this looking tone process, along with decreasing the body fat, right? So that you see the shape. Now, you do need an adequate volume as well for resistance exercises. Talked about this earlier, but progress to at least 10 total sets per muscle group per week. So for example, you could do 5 sets of quadriceps specific exercises. Quadriceps is your anterior thigh muscle. 5 sets of quadriceps on Monday, and another 5 sets of quadriceps exercises on Friday, right? That gives you adequate rest period in between. Maintain a slight caloric deficit. Mentioned this earlier, of 250 to 500 calories each day to help you burn fat. Lose that fat so that you reveal the muscle you've built underneath. Reveal that toned look. And then a little bit of cardio each week can help too, 2 to 3 times per week. I'd recommend after your weights doing the cardio. So for 20 to 30 minutes, you can do a cardiovascular session, running, cycling, whatever you wish after your weights. Another way you can do this, you could also lift in the morning and then maybe in the evening do your cardio. So you could split it up if you have the time to do that. So there's, again, several ways of going about that. All right, so number 20, improving cardiovascular function and overall health is the reason for performing cardiovascular, or you can call it cardiorespiratory exercise. And that kind of seems like a duh statement. Well, yeah, of course I do cardiovascular exercise to improve the function of my heart, my cardiovascular system and my overall health. But the reason I put that up there is because I want you to stop thinking of cardiovascular exercise as a way to really significantly decrease your body fat. Okay, so many people, they go to the gym, they get on an elliptical. I'll see people reading a book while they're on the elliptical. It's like, you're not exercising very intensely, or, they'll be on a treadmill and, yes, you're expending calories, but I don't think people get how many calories you're expending during exercise. It takes a lot of work to burn calories, right? So I think it's easier if you just create a caloric deficit with your diet and just eat less, versus trying to create a caloric deficit by doing a lot of cardiovascular exercise, right? Look at cardio as I'm doing this running, this swimming, this cycling to improve my cardiovascular system and my overall health. Okay? Of course, it can help you expend some calories to remain in a deficit to lose fat, but again, that's not its primary function, okay? So stop thinking of it as being very, very effective for reducing body fat. So for example, if you weigh 160 pounds, you may only burn around 300 calories jogging at a moderate pace for 30 minutes, right? That's not a lot. And, and you go home and eat 6 Oreo cookies, that's 320 calories right there. So the exercise you did is null and void, right? I mean, again, it's, you eat a medium-sized glazed donut, that's going to be 300 or 400 calories. You just spent 30 minutes, jogging, and you burn around 300 calories. So again, it doesn't create as large of a caloric expenditure as a lot of people think, okay? So just remember, you have to be in a caloric deficit each day to lose fat over time. Like I said, cardio can help expend some extra calories each day to lose fat and help you stay in a deficit. But really, abs are created in the kitchen, right? So that means eating less, eating healthy whole foods, taking in less calories. That's what's going to primarily drive you losing body fat. All right, 21. Realize you will hit plateaus and have setbacks with your training or your exercise program, right? So, yeah, if you hit a plateau, right, you're not progressing, you're not getting stronger, you're not, your cardiovascular, the intensity that you're, maybe your race pace, you're not doing as well in some of the races that you've been in recently, then examine your program, right? If you're not continuing to progress, right, you probably need to change a variable or maybe several variables in your program. It could be the frequency, it could be the intensity, the time, the type of exercise, right? There's a lot of things to look at and examine. For instance, maybe you're a distance runner and maybe you're dealing with some lower extremity pain and some shin splints. You might need to incorporate some cross training in your routine. So instead of going on these long runs and, you get that pounding on your hips, your knees, your shins are flared up, do some cross training, start doing some swimming so that you take that load off your joints and your body, do some cycling, right? So again, look at your program. You may need to change some variables. And after putting in years of consistent training, you also need to realize that you're going to get closer to your genetic limits, right? There's a ceiling effect with your fitness. So for instance, I've been lifting weights pretty consistently since I was 16. So put in a lot of years of weight training, and I'm at my genetic limit. I'm not going to build a significant amount more of muscle mass or strength, I guess, unless I used anabolic steroids, which I never have. But I'm at my genetic limit, right? My threshold, and that's fine. Okay, I mean, I'm just kind of maintaining my fitness level at this point. All right, so it won't really matter how much you change your program the more advanced you get because you get closer to that ceiling. And then setbacks. And I will say, though, if you're novice, you're new to training, obviously you're going to be able to progress for quite a while, right? But eventually, after years of training, you're kind of going to hit that genetic ceiling. Setbacks. Realize that with your training program, exercise, there's going to be uncontrollable life events that happen, things that are going to cause your training and your program to be put on hold. And then you may lose, your fitness level declines a bit. So you may have increased work, family responsibilities, injuries. Obviously, you're going to have to take time off, recover from the injury, maybe rehab. And so you're going to see declines in your fitness level as a result. All right, 22. Remember that supplements are supplements, right? So they're a supplement to your diet. They should not make up the bulk of your dietary intake, okay? So they shouldn't be a replacement for eating healthy, nutrient-dense whole foods, right? You're just consuming supplements in addition to the whole healthy food you should be eating, all right? Now, people ask me all the time, and when I was a trainer and a strength coach, and even at, if I'm at the gym, hey, what supplements should I take, right? Well, a lot of supplements out there on the market. They're just out there, supplement companies trying to make money. Many of them aren't really that effective. They don't really provide any type of beneficial ergogenic performance enhancing benefit. They don't provide any beneficial effects. There are some, though, that I do recommend. So let's go over here. So what are supplement recommendations? I do recommend WPI, so that's whey protein isolate. Whey protein isolate, okay? So obviously comes in a powder form. You can find this anywhere. It's readily available. Whey is actually a byproduct of cheese manufacturing. It's derived from milk. So if you look at milk, the protein in milk, 80% of it is casein, 20% of it is whey. You can extract that whey out, and it's a great, very bioavailable, rapidly digesting protein. It's high in all your essential amino acids that your body cannot make but has to get from your diet. And it's a great supplement to help stimulate muscle protein synthesis, right? To help build muscle and recover from workouts. So you're looking at 25 to a 30 gram dose of whey protein, either before, after your workout, sometime around your workout. You can even sip on it, take your protein shaker in, drink while you're working out. And like I said, typically, in the United States, we're not a third world country. There's plenty of protein around. We have plenty of meat, plenty of options for protein intake. So it's not like you need to be chugging these things down, 3, 4, 5 of them in a day. I mean, typically I may only have one in a day around when I work out. Some days I may not have any. Might have chocolate milk after my workout, right? Or I might just have a whole food meal, right? Always rely on whole food. The supplements are an addition, and they just kind of help fill in the gaps, all right? All right, the next one I'll recommend is creatine monohydrate. You're looking at 5 grams per day. You can take this anytime. I've done another video on it. You can mix it with really anything you want. Just take 5 grams a day. It's going to build up in your muscle cells, really help improve your performance in short-term high-intensity activities like weightlifting, sprinting. It's going to help you get stronger, build some more muscle. So there's a lot of benefits there with creatine. I do highly recommend that, especially for strength, power, speed athletes. It may have obviously less of an ergogenic effect for endurance athletes. For some, I would recommend a multivitamin. Multivitamin, like I said, I'm going to really put a dose there, but just if you don't eat enough fruits and vegetables, because obviously fruits and vegetables, that's where you get the majority of your vitamins and minerals from. If you don't eat enough of those, you don't look down at your plate and you don't see half of it every meal being fruits and vegetables, well, then get a good multivitamin, right? Just to fill in the gaps there. And then maybe for some, a quote, pre-workout supplement. A lot of times these are in powdered form. These are usually high in caffeine or other stimulants. So if you're sensitive to caffeine or stimulants, it may have some issues with it, but they can help boost exercise duration and intensity, and they are thought to delay fatigue. In many cases, some of the ingredients in there help delay fatigue so you can exercise longer and also reduce the perceptions of fatigue. So just in your brain, in your mind, you don't feel as tired, okay? All right, 23. So keep in mind all the health benefits you will earn by becoming more fit and just healthy overall. Okay, a lot of health benefits that are gonna happen. And I have the word earn in there because you really have to earn this, right? You have to take control of your life, just creating a new lifestyle for yourself, increasing the amount of activity and exercise you're doing, eating healthier. So you're going to earn this. You're going to earn these health benefits. And what are those health benefits? I'm just going to go down the list because there's a ton of them. Increased muscle mass, especially obviously if you're doing resistance training. Decreased body fat percentage. Well, that's from eating in a slight caloric deficit. Increased bone density. Any type of exercise that loads your body, loads your skeleton, that's going to help increase the mineral content, calcium, phosphate, all these minerals that are stored in your bone. It's going to make it thicker. There's going to be more bone mass, more dense, and you're at a decreased risk for osteoporosis later in life. So anything that loads the skeleton, again, weight training, jogging, things like that. Swimming would not because you're buoyant in water. Improved muscle strength and endurance, right? Improved cardiovascular function, decreased blood pressure, and improved blood lipid profile. So decreased triglycerides, improvement in your cholesterol levels, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, increased lifespan. So you're more fit, you're healthier, you're likely to live longer. Improved immune system function. So you're able to fight off infections better and acute illnesses. Improved memory and cognitive function. So, exercise and this new healthy lifestyle is not just good for your bones, your muscles, your heart. Exercise is great for your brain and eating healthier. So, slow brain aging down, decrease your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Reduce stress and anxiety, improve your mood, reduce the risk of various cancers like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, endometrial cancer, and lung cancer. So a lot of benefits here. Just a few more: improved blood glucose control, which leads to a decreased risk of type 2 diabetes. Exercise can be used to manage type 2 diabetes and even reverse it in some cases if you're in the early stages, right? So exercise helps sensitize your muscles and your liver and your fat cells to insulin, and it makes those cells, it allows them to more easily clear sugar out of the bloodstream, glucose out of the bloodstream, because they're more sensitive to insulin. And that's a good thing because if you're diabetic, you're insulin resistant. You want to be insulin sensitive. Increased metabolism, right? Your metabolic rate goes up. If you add more muscle mass, for instance, all right? Improved mobility and improved balance. So a ton of health benefits, right, that you will earn in this new healthy lifestyle. Your health is a priority, so invest in it. All right? So think about, you're making short-term sacrifices, costs for long-term gain. All right? So make time to exercise, make those small changes with your diet, and you're really investing in yourself over time, and you're going to reap the benefits, all those health benefits I just talked about. So spend time getting fit and healthy, or if you don't, you may end up spending a lot of time at your physician in his office, seeing him or her. And, if you just invest in your health, a lot of the diseases that are associated with an inactive lifestyle, the cardiovascular disease, the diabetes, they can be prevented, right? So there's many health conditions that probably are less likely to occur with you being more fit and healthy, so you don't have to spend your time in your physician's office, all right? Another thing to do is to, on the weekends, I always recommend, if you can, meal prep. So cook your healthy meals, store them in containers, put them in the refrigerator, have them ready to go so you can just take them with you, warm them up, eat them throughout the week. Because it's a lot harder in many cases to cook sometimes. During the week, maybe you get off work, you're tired, you don't feel like cooking dinner, so you're just tempted to grab something, right? Well, if you already have these healthy meals prepared, stored in containers, they're in the refrigerator, you come home, you just know the meal's there, you're going to pop it in, zap it, warm it up, and you're good to go. So I think meal prep is another tip that I would give. It's just a way that you can invest here and ensure that you're eating healthy through the week, okay? We are at the conclusion. Tip number 25. Been a lot of information. It's been very dense. The last tip is just get started today, okay? Not tomorrow. Don't wait. Don't keep putting it off. Don't wait till New Year's resolution. A lot of people do that. I'll just wait till January 1. So when you see the gyms get crazy busy, everybody's in there, New Year's resolutions, and then they're gone by like February because they're like, oh, this is hard. And they don't want to adhere to it, not dedicated and stick with it. So just get started today. Even if you don't know where to start, like I said, make small changes. Don't overthink things. Don't overcomplicate it. And if you need help, get advice from somebody that's knowledgeable. But the main thing is just don't put this off. You should invest in your health so that you can live a long, healthy, fruitful life.